Happy holidays, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. And today I have a video for you that, in full disclosure, I am nervous about doing. I have read 74 books so far this year as of today, which is 12/22. So December 22nd, 74 books. And I've always done the same system for myself before I ever made YouTube. So I just track the books that I've read in a notebook, and then I just put the title and the author. And then I'll put like a little heart, and sometimes I color in the hearts to show that I really liked a book, and then sometimes I'll add additional hearts. And then I go back at the end of the year for the first time that I have to, I don't have to make a favorite book video, but I want to make a favorite book video. And looking over my system, I'm like, this is really hard to narrow down and figure out what my top 10 favorite books of 2024 were. So I'm just going to do my best with this. Also, once again, because I'm all about transparency here, I'm also freaked out because I'm in the same situation that I was in last weekend, where it is now Sunday, the day I put out my videos, and I am just starting to make this video, and then I have to run to yoga class. Then I have to run back here, hope that I can do some quick editing before I have a couple of other things that I need to do today, because we're actually going to spend today with my in-laws. We're doing our holiday get together a little bit earlier. So yeah, I'm not going to be on time with this video in terms of getting it done during the daytime and posted. So yeah, that's just how my life operates. I'm hoping that I can get things to run more smoothly in 2025, but we'll see. So here we are. I had such an amazing reading year in 2024. I've had some years where it's been sort of slumpy, where I just wasn't really happy with the books that I was reading, and it just seemed like everything I picked up I was kind of meh about. So it was another reason why it was really hard to narrow it down, because this was a great reading year. And then just figuring out, because I really loved horror this year, but there were some great cozies that I read, and some nonfiction, and just all different kinds of books. So we'll just see what I came up with. So I hope you enjoyed this video. So let's jump right in. So in the number 10 spot, we have A Deck Stack for Murder by Eliza Levine. And this was an awesome debut cozy murder book, and I'm definitely continuing on with the series. And the cover itself is gorgeous, but I really enjoyed this one a lot. This is the first in a Cafe Arcana mystery. So we have a coffee shop and a main character who does tarot readings as well. And our main character is also Jewish, so she's always weaving in some things about her Jewish heritage as well, which is really cool, because I don't really read enough books about people who practice other religions all the time, and that being a part of the book. That was really cool. So we're following Ava Goldberg post-divorce. So she just packs up all her stuff, as tends to happen in cozies, and moves to a new location. So she has to meet new people and get her business up and going. But a murder takes place, and actually she is not the main target in this book, but someone very close to her is. So she has to help solve that mystery. And what I loved about this one is that the whole time I actually thought that I understood the twist, had my whole eye set on this other person, and it wasn't. So I like when a cozy murder actually tends to go against my expectations, and it just shows what a great writer Eliza Levine is. And there were a lot of great cozies that I read this year, but this one was a real standout for me. So I could end up, if you're interested, just making a video about my very favorite cozies this year. Obviously, because this one made my top 10 and is the only cozy, this would be in my number 1 spot. So I actually have a tie for number 9, and I don't really feel bad about that. This is my video, and I can do whatever I want, because in this spot, I had 2 novellas, and I really just couldn't choose between them. I really just couldn't. So the first one is Dear Laura by Gemma Amor. And I discovered Gemma Moore's work through one of the anthologies that I read this year and wanted to read more by her. And Dear Laura was so unhinged. It was really crazy. I really discovered this year, in terms of my taste in horror, that for some reason it really stands out to me when we have protagonists who are either children during the book, or there's like a dual timeline where we are going back into their history as a child and really like learning about what sort of happened to them when they were a kid or a teenager and how that's impacting the present timeline. I feel very emotionally connected to those books. That's kind of how I figure out what books I'm going to end up putting on my top 10 list, are the ones that if a book makes me feel something really deeply in my body, and we'll talk more about that as this video goes on, or it really makes me think about a lot of things, or I just feel like very emotionally connected and I can't stop thinking about what happened in the book or the character or any of that, and I just want to talk about it all the time. That's the kind of book that I want to have on my top list, because that means that that book had like a real impact on me, even if other people didn't feel the same way. So in Dear Laura, we are following Laura, and she's an adult when we meet her, but we realize that something tragic happened to her when she was about 13 or 14 years old. And a friend of hers, her best friend, who was just starting to become her boyfriend, disappears, goes missing. And on her birthday and almost every birthday thereafter, she receives these really creepy letters that offer her the opportunity to find out what happened to Bobby. But she has to do some things in return to build up trust with this secret person who's only known as X. So we just kind of continue on seeing year after year what is happening and how Laura is sort of trying to keep things together. And I just thought I could see this actually happening to, not actually like happening in real life, but like I felt the way that Laura responded to what was happening to her was realistic for a teenager. And I just felt like the creep factor was so intense. You did have some questions answered. I felt the ending maybe wasn't like exactly what I had hoped for, but it was a complete ending and I was fine with that. But just the premise of it and what she went through, I really felt for Laura, and I really felt like this was a great metaphor for grief in general, or when tragic things happen to us and we just want the answers. And sometimes we just like can't get those answers, and in searching for those answers, we're not able to move forward in our lives in a healthy way. Great book, but very, very sad, obviously. So that's why tied for ninth novella would be The Amazing Alligator Girl by Kristen Dearborn, because this was like an amazing survival horror novella, and it was very fast paced from the get-go with the prologue at the beginning. It was just nonstop action. I liked all the different characters in it. It was a wild ride. There were so many different things going on in this book, and it kept my attention the whole time. This was a fun book to read. Obviously, horror is, it's meant to be like scary or evoke certain things. And a lot of the horror that really got to me this year was more of the sad kind of horror, or ones that I just felt like, oh my gosh, like very tragic. And not that bad things didn't happen in this book. They obviously did, but it was just characters involved. Like a lot of them were very badass, and they were just going through all these things. And I just thought that this was so fun. And also another gorgeous cover. I would recommend it. It takes place in Florida, and it's like one of those tourist attractions where you go out on a boat in the swamp, and there's just all kinds of crazy things. Mutant gators and swamp Nazis, crazy things ensue. So check this one out. So 8th on my list was Penpal by Dathan Auerbach. Oh, I should have mentioned at the very beginning that these books are just based on what I read in 2024. Not all of these books were actually published in 2024. So I actually found out that this one was an older book. Man, this one packed a punch. I felt like this was the saddest book that I had read all year long. We are following a main character who is writing as an adult, trying to figure out and put the pieces together of something that happened to him and his best friend as children. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil everything, but this is a very dark book. It does deal with children, obviously, but it also had so many beautiful parts to it about friendship and first love that just made all of the horror even more horrific, because you had all of these other scenes that just like really touched you emotionally and were like, wow, yes, this is the beauty of friendship, or yes, like this is exactly what some teenagers' first love story feels like, and most of us have all experienced those kind of things. So then to weave in all this horror with that, I just thought It was really well done. Now, all that to say, I wouldn't say that this is a perfect book. And a friend of mine, we were talking about this book recently because we did feel like there might have been like some plot holes or some things that didn't quite work. And then when I researched the book later, I found that this was like originally creepypasta where one of the chapters was its own standalone. And then he went back and wrote more additional things to create a whole book around it. Some things might seem like they don't fit, but I felt like overall it was a very strong story and it packed an emotional punch. I was fine with it. So that was number 8. In the number 7 spot, we have The September House by Carissa Orlando. And this is the only haunted house book, I believe, that I put in my top 10 spot. I love a good haunted house horror book. This one just like checked all the boxes. It had funny parts in it, which I appreciated. It wasn't predictable. Like at one point, like towards the end, I was like, oh, is this going to play out like these things normally do play out? But it didn't. So I was very happy with that. And it was a good mix of some supernatural with psychological horror. I felt that our main character was very complex because she had parts of her that I didn't always like, but I could appreciate it and understand why she was the way she was. This older character, so I did appreciate that we had an older protagonist, content to be living in her insanely haunted house. But when her husband goes missing and her daughter is like, I'm coming back whether you want me to or not, because we have to talk about what happened to dad, and I feel like you're hiding things from me, it just gets really out of control. So I really enjoyed reading about this family and reading about this house. And I thought it was a good balance of, some humor with the horror elements. And I really enjoyed this one. I could see this one being a really good movie. So in my number 6 spot, I have All's Well by Mona Awad. And this was my first Mona Awad, and it will definitely not be my last. This book was really weird and amazing, and I really enjoyed it. It started off as sort of a slow burn for me at first. I wasn't really sure how I felt about it, but I'm glad I continued on with it, because it was great. So in this book, we have Miranda Fitch, and she's our main character, and she's dealing with chronic pain, chronic illness, and her life is sort of falling apart at this point. It's just not going well at all. And she is a professor at a college in the theater department, and she wants to put on All's Well That Ends Well by Shakespeare, but everyone else does not want to do that. They all want to do Macbeth, and she has her reasons that we will learn about in this book, but why she doesn't want to perform Macbeth. And I really liked how she tied in the Shakespeare to what was happening in the story, to the character. And there's some very surreal, magical realism kind of parts to this. And I just remember after reading it, I wanted to actually jump back in from the beginning and just dive back in and do it all over again. I felt like this would be the kind of book, because I was an English major in college, that I would have loved to have written an analytical paper on and done a very deep dive and gotten into so much research and just talked about themes in this book, because I just felt like this book was incredibly deep and insightful and weird. And there was just so many rich things to explore in it. And I just really loved it, even if I didn't feel like I understood everything at the first read. So this is one that I would like to read in the Mercury Reread Challenge of 2025 that I'm planning on doing. So I would highly recommend this one if you're into weird fiction. In my number 5 spot, I have the Rack Anthology, edited by Tom Deedy. I didn't think for the longest time that I was someone who liked short stories. I just didn't think it was for me, but I picked this one up and I really enjoyed it. And I discovered that I do like short stories, and I definitely love anthologies where it is a mixture of different authors. This one here, they're all stories inspired by vintage horror paperbacks from the spinning rack that they used to have in the 70s and the 80s. And I love this because I got introduced to a bunch of authors, including local authors I had never heard of before. And then I went into, deep diving. This is how I discovered Kristen Dearborn, I believe. Yes, Kristen Dearborn. And I liked her book. And then The Last Call of the Cicada by Gwendolyn Kiss, I end up reading The Haunting of Velkwood after that, which I'll talk about in another video. So there were so many new to me authors, and I just really enjoyed this collection. So many fun stories, Some were really funny, other ones were a little bit more somber in tone, but there was really only one in the collection that didn't really work for me, and all the other ones I thought were great. If you are on the fence about anthologies, this would be a good starting point for horror anthologies. So, number 5. I actually just paused the making of this video because I was looking at my 4, 3, and 2 and decided that I was on the fly going to rearrange them because this was so hard to like narrow it down, but I guess I'm in control and I'm just going to do whatever I want. So in the number 4 spot is The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels, which I read earlier this year, and it was my first introduction to Janice Hallett books, and I read all of her books this year, and they were all great, but this is the one that I think was her absolute best, knocked it out of the park, and it's about a cult and uncovering the mystery of what happened 20 years ago with this cult when all these people were found dead and this baby went missing, and this reporter is trying to uncover like, hey, like, does anybody know, like, this baby would be an adult at this point, like, can we figure out where they went and what happened? And I just remember it was like a wild ride. I loved that it had text messages and emails and all of these other things. So you feel like you're one of the detectives or lawyers trying to figure out what this mystery is all about and who did it and why. And it was just really great. And I remember that was another one that I was like, I need to reread this because I enjoyed the experience so much. And I wanted to go back and see how she had pieced together all these things that I might have missed in the initial reading to see like how it all came together in the end. So I do want to reread that at some point. It was so fantastic. So if that sounds good and you're interested in reading about mysteries regarding cults, that's the one for you. In the number 3 spot, we have the only nonfiction book on the list, and that is a memoir. It is Sociopath by Patrick Gagney. This book was unbelievable, blew me away. I listened to the author read her story in audio, and it was fantastic. So I definitely recommend listening to the audio of this. So it's just really cool to read a memoir about a sociopath by a sociopath, especially one who became a psychologist. And we get to hear the story of her childhood all the way up to present day and how she navigated everything in her life and all the signs of her sociopathy as a child and all the illegal things that she did throughout her life that she was very open about, and how these things impacted her family relationships and her romantic relationships and her friendships, and just the struggle she had of both accepting her sociopathy, also keeping it in check, and just trying to, navigate the world and feel a certain way because, going through life kind of feeling very muted in a lot of ways and not being able to feel or express a wide range of emotions is very difficult on Patrick Gagney. And also I felt it was very interesting to see how she isn't set up to just, be the only character who's having some issues here. Clearly seeing how all these other people interacting with her, like, they have their own things going on. And I think it was good to see her really expose the fact that we as a society, obviously, and for, good reason, like have very negative associations with sociopathy, but also looking at the fact everyone is flawed and we all have things that we need to work on and no one is perfect. Some people have things going on that they don't realize are just as problematic in some way. We should all be a little bit more compassionate, I guess, for other people, even sociopaths who can't feel compassion. Anyway, I thought the book was amazing and I highly recommend it. So check that one out. So in the number 2 spot, we have My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. And I just finished this 2 days ago and it blew me away. I had no idea. I've never read anything by Jennifer McMahon before. And now I want to read everything she's ever written. And in this book, we are following Allison O'Connor. It is the holiday season, and she is married and has 2 daughters. And she's estranged from her mother, and for good reason. Her mother was abusive to her and her older brother when they were children. But her mother is now dying of cancer, and she wants to come stay with her and live out the rest of her life there because she really only has like weeks to live in hospice care is going to come and be set up. I had no idea what to expect about this. I just knew it was a horror book, but didn't really know what I was in for. And this had everything that I love in a horror. We have psychological horror mixed in with some demonic possession type of things going on, cursed objects, all kinds of things. And it was so amazing. But I have to say, the reason why this book is in the top 2 spot, 74 books I read, was the ending. The whole like last few, maybe 2 to 3 chapters, my heart was like racing in my chest. I remember like yelling out loud 2 different points. I was like, when I realized certain things, I was like, oh my God. And then at the very end, I was like, what in the fact that like a book would make me actually yell out loud to my whole family. And after I was done reading it, I had to pull aside my husband, who was a non-reader, just so I could talk about this book and just let it all out, because words can't express it really. You have to read this book. I'm not someone I like watching films and movies, but basically I could see myself, I was like, this has to be a movie. I want to see this movie, but if someone's going to do it, they need to do it correctly. I have very specific ways that I would want this filmed, because I can see the ending in my mind of how this would make an awesome movie. And I just thought this was freaking scary. This was scary to me. Not because could happen in real life, but it was just so chilling. And I've read a lot of Stephen King. Well, not a lot, but I've read like some Stephen King, especially the ones that people think are his scariest books, like Pet Sematary, for example. And I didn't find Pet Sematary as scary as I found this book. I found Pet Sematary to be more sad and just more like creepy. This book here, I was like, oh my, it just threw me for a loop, that ending. Wow. Yeah, definitely deserves to be in my number 2 spot. And the number 1 book I read in 2024 is, drumroll please, the entire collection of Rachel Harrison's work. Put these all in order because Rachel Harrison was new to me this year. I admit that I was extremely late to the Rachel Harrison party, and that's okay. From now on, I will never miss another thing that she writes. I'm looking forward to reading and owning any book that she puts out in the future, because she totally made my 2024 reading year so special. All of her books that I have in my hands right here are just top notch. They all were rated very highly. So if I had just put these as their own individual, half the list would have been right there. So I still wanted to include other books that I really enjoyed this year. So honorable mention is Bad Dolls, because this was a short story collection. I really enjoyed this one. It's 4 Dark Tales. Highly recommend. All right, so in the 5th place of her whole entire collection here is The Return. And this story is probably her most traditional horror story. So this one is a little bit more scary than the other ones. And we're dealing with female friendships, because our main character, she's got these friends that she's known since college, but one of them, named Julie, goes missing for about, I want to say like 2 years. It's been a long time. And then she randomly shows back up, and they decide that they are all going to reunite and have like a girls' getaway weekend to reconnect in this, new boutique hotel that kind of reminds me of, it gives Shining vibes a little bit. So they go and, they're trying to piece together what's been going on with Julie, because she's not saying very much about where she's been, and chaos ensues. In 4th place is the first book that I've read by Rachel Harrison this year, and that was Such Sharp Teeth. And I love this book. This one, we have our main character, Rory, and she becomes a werewolf, and it's dealing with how this is impacting her life. And I loved a lot of the metaphors that were in here around being a werewolf, which is also parallel to Rory's sister being pregnant and not having a lot of control over your body autonomy and all of that. So this one was great. Not as scary as The Return, but still like spooky enough, sort of in that sweet spot. And this was a great read. So in 3rd place, we have Black Sheep. I mean, it was kind of hard to choose between Black Sheep and Such Sharp Teeth. This one had the edge because I just felt like the romantic interest in Such Sharp Teeth was a little too perfect for me. So I like this one because it has a plot twist in it that maybe people see coming or not. That's why you can't really talk about the book too much, because you don't want things to be given away. But we have our main character, Vesper, and this is all about family relationships, the dynamics that we have with our parents, and some nature and nurture debate questions here. And this one was really great. In second place is Cackle, and I just love this. This is what most people call cozy horror, whether you like that term or not. It definitely gives off some cozy vibes to me because our main character, Annie, has broken up or been dumped. It's kind of weird. It's like it's a mutual thing, but it's really not a mutual thing when they break up. So she moves and she gets a new teaching job in this like quaint neighborhood, and it's fall and there's, coffee shops and all this stuff. But she makes a new friend, and she picks up right away that the rest of the town has like a weird relationship with her new friend. It seems kind of like something is off. There's horror elements on this one, but it's much lighter than the other ones. But I just really loved seeing how Annie grew throughout the book. And some people have mixed reviews on the ending. I really liked it. I want to reread this like every year in the fall because I just love this book so much. And in the complete number one spot for me, so thirsty. This book was the best book that I read all year. This one was wild. This one is a lot more violent and a lot more spicy than her other books. This is a vampire story, and we're also dealing with friendships, and we're also dealing with romantic relationships. But at the heart of it, we're dealing with themes about desire, the consequences of not following our desires or of following our desires, where we kind of can be stuck or complacent and need to shake things up a bit. And I just feel like this really sort of speaks to the female existence a lot of the time. And I just loved it so much. And I will probably reread this every year as well. And I can't wait to see what she comes out with next. And I just love that all of her books are in some way feminist horror. Yeah, I mean, she is the best. She is my all-time favorite author, and it just made my entire reading year. So if you haven't read anything by Rachel Harrison, I don't know what you're waiting for. And that's it. Those were my top 10 favorite books of 2024, and I am looking forward to all the books that I'm going to be reading in 2025. So in the upcoming weeks, I think I'm going to participate in the 25 for 2025 and show you the 25 books that I'm 100% committing to. But I know that I have way more on my list than would make the 25. Yeah, I'm just really excited. So I hope you all have a great holiday and that it's all relaxing and that you get to read lots of books. And I will see you next time.